everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of Dialogue at the Crossroad, and this is a space and a moment where everything just comes up naturally. So it's unscripted, we don't have anything planned ahead, and that's the beauty of everything. So I'm so happy to be here, joined by a new person from the UK that I've just met like a couple of weeks ago, and I will give him the space to introduce himself and what made him say yes when I invited him to join us here. All for you.
My name's Aidan Belazaire, originally from the UK, but I've been traveling full-time now for about a year so far. And yeah, I used to work in TV and film and marketing and advertising, but after a while I realized that I was very interested in wellness and specifically personal growth. So I realized I had a lot of things I needed to learn about myself, and through traveling I was finding that out more and more from speaking to different people. So I started to create content around it, videos online around personal growth, in an attempt to help myself, but then also help other people too. And that led me to where I'm currently at here in Vietnam, and we met over coffee, had a wonderful chat early in the morning. It was one of those kind of deep talks that just you didn't expect, but it just happened. And yeah, that's literally led me to here, and I'm really excited to talk to everybody.
And I'm so grateful to have you here today, because I know you're going to give a part of yourself in this dialogue, and that's what we are looking for. Before we started, just having a raw conversation with different people that came across and met in the middle, which is what we call Crossroad. So I'm still happy to be joined by our beautiful Eva here. Can you tell us like a little bit of a takeaway or something that you know that still comes up from the previous things that we have been talking about?
Hey, sure, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. But yeah, I'm afraid I'm struggling a little bit with recounting, the takeaways. It's still a little bit early for me. But yeah, it's been a few days since our last episode, and let's see how it goes.
And of course, Douglas is here, and also Com is here. Douglas is here, and you are the elder of this dialogue and these episodes where we are going to just go with the flow, whatever comes up, but you're the one who's reflecting and giving your thoughts about the questions that might come up for us when it comes to self-awareness and self-acceptance, and anything that you can add to open the dialogue for today, Douglas?
Sure. Once again, I'm also very pleased that we're doing this, because I find there's a great value in talking together with people about these things that are helpful and relevant. Yeah, it does come partly from ideas that came out of books I've written that are related to the fact that I've been a psychotherapist for quite a long time, and it's nice that you call me an elder. I sometimes say I'm an old man, but the good part of that is that it's given me life experience, and I really think there's a value to sharing what that is, and I think this platform is a great way to do it. So, and the other thing that really strikes me is that we call it a dialogue at the crossroads, because it's a cultural crossroads. We all come from different backgrounds and places and influences and childhoods, and yet here we are in Hoi An, Vietnam, and we're able to, in very human ways, converse and talk about what's real for us. And sometimes we discover what's different, maybe related to our background, but the value is that we're talking. We're doing it from a place of care and kindness and compassion and a deep need or want to understand each other, to say, we're human together, how does that work? So again, this for me is let's just say, a fulfilled aspiration, you know, to be able to share ideas in a setting that feels real. And so I really appreciate Kathy for being a catalyst. She's a yes. She's somebody that says yes and says, I want to take on the responsibilities to make things happen. So, yeah, there's always this mystery about what are we going to talk about today. And yes, we do have a legacy. We have now 4 previous conversations. And often we start out by sort of centering it around this idea of self-acceptance. And so even though I've said this probably every session, I think it's important to say that for me at least, represents an important marker. That when we come to the place of self-acceptance, in other words, as we are, that then becomes a platform or the catalyst that allows us the kind of freedom to live our life creatively, exploring and discovering who we are and what our life is going to be. The opposite of that, where we're caught up in self-doubt and self-judgment and an overly critical voice inside us that might be related to things we'd heard throughout our life, we limit what that potential is. And I often quote Carl Jung, who said, we like a plant which from a seed becomes an oak tree, in other words, the fulfillment of its potential, so humans become what we're meant to be, but we get stuck, okay? And I think, for me, this is a powerful notion, that we live in this state where we're less than we can be because we get stuck in ways that maybe we don't fully understand. And so part of personal growth and self-discovery and being able to listen and talk about who we are is a way of getting unstuck. It's a way of understanding and having insight into, what is it that keeps us limited. And often it's beliefs we have or emotions that are the subtext to who we are: shame, guilt, fear, anger, anxiety, and they exist on a kind of a level that we don't always recognize. And so it's important for us to bring those things up and release ourselves from the ways that they've held us in place. So I know that's kind of a big introduction, but yeah, I think it's maybe lays the platform for conversation.
I just have like a first question that came up to mind after hearing the concept of self-acceptance and saying yes to life and just be living life in the okayness of who you are, authenticity per se. So what came up is that when you say that you accepted yourself in that level of okayness where you can say to whatever comes to you, does that also correlate to the trust that you have developed? And what part of your inner child needs that you have met personally? Because the journey of life seems like we have to reparent ourselves, our inner child, to achieve self-acceptance, to be self-aware of those needs and not extract it from the external world.
I think you're right. We become both our provider, our parent, to our inner child. And the idea is that when our needs are met, and we've in the past discussed what those needs are, then we're not seeking those needs being met unconsciously in the world around us. And when it relates to self-acceptance, that often looks like validation, approval, belonging, connection, okay? And of course, there's the flip side, which is the fear of rejection, disapproval, being an outsider, isolated. And so often people are leaning in the direction of what they're afraid of. That's really what insecurity is. So once we sort of cross over the line of, yeah, I'm okay, I'm a pretty human being and I'm still learning and growing and figuring it out, but I've sort of given myself enough approval to say I don't have to seek that from others, okay? I don't have to prove myself, I don't have to win approval. I've already secure in that what I think of as a foundation of who I am. And you know, I'm not waving a flag thinking, oh, I've arrived and I'm there, and you know. But I do believe that over time, and particularly in my mid-40s, I did sort of cross a line, and I realized this is my life. Nobody's gonna do for me what I need to do for myself. And that responsibility then became ultimately meeting my own needs without even exactly realizing what they were. And the more that became true, the more empowered I felt, the more confident I felt, the more clarity I had, and the more direction I could have towards what I value the most, okay? What it is that guides the life that I want. And please, I'm not promoting myself as the example. I'm just saying that there's a process and we keep going down the road, and as we get further, we discover more and more what that actually means, to accept ourselves as I am, as we are. And it also means accepting others then, accepting them where they are and the journey they are, and allowing for human naiveties and the kinds of mistakes we make when we're finding our way. So there's more room then, less judgment for
Yeah. How about you, Aiden? Like, based from our previous conversation, you were talking about how you wanted to change your life and make your passion of making contents about self-development, but also helping the digital creators to create something out from authenticity. Do you feel like you are currently crossing a line and you are transitioning to something that feels so authentic to you as an individual?
Well, first off, I resonate very much with what you say. I feel like that threshold that you pass in your mid-40s, I feel like I'm sort of there at the very end of my 30s. I'm 39 now. And it's funny because I thought I knew who I was before I was traveling, when I lived in the UK. And I thought I had this like authenticity, quote unquote, down. But it isn't until I started to explore personal growth and started to travel that I realized that I was just wrong. I was wrong about what I thought I wanted, and I was wrong about who I thought I was. And before I left, I remember there was this moment where somebody I helped found very quick success online, and I felt jealous. And jealousy is not I don't think it's something that people talk about enough, because we kind of see it as like a dirty emotion, but if I'm being very honest, I was jealous of their very fast success, and it really highlighted where my ego was most fragile. And it just sort of blew my mind a little bit, because I thought I was very comfortable with who I am. I thought I didn't really care what people thought, and I did. I really did. So yeah, in trying to help myself and help others, I think that's brought me a level of understanding that it's very hard to just arrive to and be in a place, because we're always changing and modifying, and I don't think understanding is a place that we can just get to and arrive to and then we're like namaste for the rest of our life. I think you have to understand that you're constantly going to be changing, and therefore you're constantly going to be learning more and more about yourself And also the way you think about things will change. Like how you are today is not who you're going to be and how you are in 10 years. And so now I start to look at everything, and I hope this answers the question. I think I'm going on a crazy tangent here. But now I kind of look at authenticity as kind of like a river that's ebbing and flowing, rather than like like an island in the middle of that river that you can get to and stay on. And the other thing I'm learning is that if you jump in that river, most of us try to either like swim against the flow, so we can stay in one spot even if that's quite unnatural. And instead I kind of think it's good if you can just hold your breath, line your back and float and just kind of go with it. It's not always easy, and for a lot of people, including myself, it doesn't always feel natural to do that, to allow the unknown to take over and to just see where you kind of end up and where you can go naturally. But if you're okay with doing that, I think you get to a level of understanding by not trying to get to a level of understanding about yourself, by sort of just arriving there and then looking back and evaluating.
Douglas, he mentioned about jumping into the unknown and this feeling of like it's not easy. And I always have this thought that the path less taken is a path where people, it's an anxiety-induced path, you know, because you will lose control. And when you lose control, a lot of self-limiting beliefs comes up. Is this where people must focus and look into, instead of like fighting against the current, so to say? Is this, what are the possible, you know, like the not so easy obstacles when someone have to let go, based on your experience? For me personally, there's a couple of them, but I know it's totally different from each of us. How about?
Well, I love the metaphor of the river, okay? Because life flows. There's a lot happening to us. You know, the current of life, the social environment, the influence of social media and the times we're in, all of those things are part of the life we're in. So I say we live life and life lives us, okay? There's this relationship between who am I and how am I shaping and forming the direction, and how much of it is not in my control, how much of it is about me just figuring out how to avoid the obstacles and go along with and accept. Ultimately, that's the benefit of discovering what it means to accept. I myself I'm not an advocate for the idea of passive acceptance, okay? Where I just flow and say, okay, whatever, and life is going to take me. I believe there's a kind of an active acceptance, which says, I'm part of this. There's something that's uniquely me, and it's lined up with values, it's lined up with expression, the right for each of us to have expression, be creative, to be a participant in whatever this thing is. But to realize it's not significant. We're pretty small in the bigger scheme of what all this is. But there's a difference between finding that harmony and saying, I do matter, each of us matters, okay? And being too passive or too accepting and then just throwing up our hands and says, well, whatever. And then maybe being victimized by life because we're not being able to have boundaries and understand, you know, that the way we treat each other and how we go about this is, I think that's the dance. And for me, it's often when do I need to act and when do I need to let go? When do I need to say something? When do I need to hold my tongue or be quiet or just listen to what that is within myself? And I think this is the art of living, you know, is to figure out, okay, when do I apply myself and when do I restrain, or maybe we don't want too much restraint, okay? We certainly don't want repression, okay? But we want to be able to realize the world around us and that we're part of something. There's a mutuality, there's a participation. And so it is about, one of my enjoyable quotes is from William James, who says, the art of wisdom is the art of knowing what to overlook. So it means, figuring out when do I respond and when do I let it go, So.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my brain is finally waking up.
Waking up, go girl.
Yeah, so what I've been, I guess, thinking about, what's been in the back of my mind since our last meeting, last episode, is that you talked about viewing life and through the lens of experiences, like being here and now in the experience, rather than setting goals and then there goes like high expectations, idealizing something, devaluing something, like relating to this self-image, like the narcissistic part more rather than the authentic experiencing part. My question is, how do you construct those experiences that you are living here and now into something that makes meaning, constitutes meaning? Because I personally struggle a lot with experiencing if it does not in any way map on something, like something bigger, let's say. So I'm not really good at setting goals. I struggle with that a lot, probably because I'm always afraid that I won't be able to achieve it, like I disappoint myself. And experiencing is great, but also I get overwhelmed by anxiety at some point, because I feel like, okay, so I'm in here and now, but like, how does it fit into my life? What's next? So yeah, how does one find a balance? And maybe you have some thoughts here.
What a profound question to be asking, and at such an early stage in your life, okay, to be thinking about how to actually guide the process of your life when you're really learning from not too many years of adulthood, I mean, and so yes, the anxiety that might come along with that question is expecting to know the answer, and part of it is to hold that question open and discover it with the benefit of time, okay? So it's not putting pressure on yourself to think you should know. That said, I will, so one of our tendencies and one of the ways we're influenced nowadays is what I call future mindedness, okay? I set a goal, I organize my life in the direction of that goal, and I measure my success based on whether I reach it or not, and how quickly and efficiently, and while there's a benefit to that, and anyone who's accomplished a goal can feel good about having done that, there's also a lot of things that we don't consider. When we narrow the scope of our intentions, our efforts, we eliminate a whole lot of things that might be part of our experience, okay? We're channeling our energies towards something. It takes us somewhat out of the present and leads us into the prioritization of some time else, some other thing. So first of all, I never use the word goal, okay? The best I can do is intention, and the reason intention for me is slightly better is because it has more room for what's actually happening. So life is living me, and I have that intention, but I'm mostly trying to do it from the present, okay? The second thing that I think is that figuring out, well, what is it? What is it that represents what that is? And I often talk about two things. One is related to our values, okay? And so it's having a life that's in line with what matters most, okay? What it is that it represents my individual highest form, but what also then is applicable to let's say, humanity, And we could say, well, what is it that, we can't do without? Like life would be very different if there was no love in the experience of our life, And so for me, that always fits into a category of a value that has priority. Of course, that's a big question. How do we love, But I think part of what we need to do is keep asking ourselves what's important. And the second thing is that it's the experiences we're having as we go that end up being the place where we discover the quality of our experience. So the quality of our experience is how engaged we are in the here and now experiences we're having. Okay? And that can be any time, any place. It doesn't have to be, it's a beautiful meal with all the right foods, and it can be when we're fully present to where we are, including some of the painful things we might feel or the frustrations that come along with miscommunication, or somehow the quality of our experience as we're living, for me, is the place where I try to exist. So the future gets reined in. I unfold into the future. I don't go after it, you see. And of course, maybe that's easier as you get older too, because there's less future, right? I'm already over the hill, as they say, And I can understand that here you guys are figuring out how do I shape and form my life, and it's a different stage, and so but it is actually dealing with that question: how do I continue to let my life unfold from the place where I am prioritizing what matters most? And those are all big questions. What matters most? Well, what is that? What do I want? What is my desire? I'll say one more thing, and I know I'm kind of hoarding the time here, but I love this little thing I discovered called levels of desire. Okay? Because desire is an important part of who we are. And level 1 is I want what I want when I want it. Okay? We could say it's very typical of a kid, a 5-year-old, right? They're not future-minded. They're not putting anything into context. They just know, I want that and I want it now, and and it's a real valid thing. And it's a part of who we continue to be. I want what I want when I want it. But when we mature and develop, we often then start to contextualize. So level 2 desire is, I want what's good for me, what's healthy for me. I want to be able to feel good about, what I desire for myself. Okay. Now, it doesn't exclude, the piece of chocolate or the things that are, satiatingly desirable. Okay. But it puts that into a context where we don't just eat chocolate all the time every day, because we realize that's not good for me, And level 3 is when level 1 and level 2 aligns with what's good for humanity. So I want what's good for me and is in line with what's good for all of us. What's good for the betterment of the people around me. What's contributing, and it separates the individual self from the participation we have in a much bigger development of consciousness, a community of care and compassion, all these things that have to do with what we might perceive as being forwarding and helping and participating in the well-being of humanity. Now, humanity is a big word, but I actually believe it, yeah.
The third one is really tricky because people would have very different ideas about what's good for humanity and what's good for the community. And I mean, this is where this whole tyrannical mindset is coming from. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I just have this impression that whenever a person is attempting to say what's good for, what's good for everybody, well, first it's usually a projection of their own beliefs, and often it doesn't result into much good.
Well, and I think coming from answering that for ourselves is always contextualized with, the conflicts that come from somebody else living out what they believe that to be true. And you're absolutely right. There are those for whom power and control is their answer to that question, to determine for everyone else what they think is the best. So I don't think we can try to influence how other people answer that question. I think we have to concentrate on what it is that we bring. And sometimes it's holding the space open for care and compassion and empathy and understanding. And sometimes it's recognizing a boundary that says, no, that's not acceptable. That's not fair. That's not just. Justice is a virtue, a value. And we have to stay within the parameter of what that might mean to us. So it doesn't mean that somehow we're going to be the bright light that everybody sees, okay? It's more we're going to represent ourselves in a world that is fraught with the limitations I talked about before, the ways in which collectively we are messy. We are drowning in fears and guilts and things that are historically traumatized people. We can't make the assumption that everyone will get on board when we feel like we are living our own.
But before you will sort of achieve that level 3 of having collective desires for the people, does it necessary for us to go through level 1 and level 2, and then how are we going to have this feeling of like expansion, and the boundaries, and not projecting our own personal limitations towards the collective? Is that?
Yeah, and the short answer is yes. Level 1 and level 2 are integrated. Okay, so it's not jumping to level 3 and thinking I know what everyone needs, and not understanding that my own priority is actually to focus on myself. So it's not a save the world mindset. It's to live from the inside out in a way that reflects, first of all, level 1, which is very realistic, and we shouldn't throw it out. We shouldn't throw out our basic desires for pleasure and joy and beauty and gratifications of some certain kinds, and then level 2 is a question that says, what does it really mean to be, I could say, healthy, or to be in living in our wellness? So what does it mean to be well, to be congruent with our values in ways that allow us to feel empowered and to feel that self-acceptance, okay? And then for me, it seems like a very natural flow to say, well, I'm not projecting that on other people, but I am living with that idea that this is not a counterpoint to what is good for other people. It's actually a harmony with what it is that. So I think your question is a good one, and it raises a lot about how we navigate the societies we're in, the influences of the world around us. The place we're most responsible is for the one organism, the one being that exists through at this time and place through our being. So.
A follow-up question, Douglas. Let's say you feel already in that okayness of helping the humanity, and you have mentioned about, not in the mentality of I want to save the world, because for me personally, I got into that state where I want to save the world because I can see what are the common problem, and we were talking about ikigai also yesterday, but then I got to. And then a lot of things resurfaces, and these are the needs that I actually need to focus on and to work on, instead of going into a space where I want to save the world, I want to save people. Is there a threshold, like levels for us to meet ourselves, to provide for ourselves, to heal, to be able to help others?
It's a great question, and I'd be curious to hear what other people think too, but briefly my answer is that when we tend to ourself, it is helping others, okay? So it's not like, I see your problem and I'm going to impose my help on you, okay? And even in the profession I'm in, people are choosing to come for that help, okay? It's not, I'm looking for who it is that needs help and I'm going to go rescue them, or I'm going to, it's really about the value they might see in the process that I can hold open because I'm already okay, reasonably okay. So, and I think that's a very important distinction, because I think we do realize that part of personal growth and self-development is not to exclude others, but to realize that we are part of all of this, and the best thing we can do is to tend to our own well-being. That itself is the gift we give. Okay? It's not saying who needs my help and I'm going to go, attack them with my goodness, It's more to say I have self-acceptance, and certain people are going to be drawn to that, and therefore there's a benefit to the collective in what we do. You're nodding. What's going through your mind?
To help others, you really need to help yourself to begin with, and whether that's a level of understanding or personal growth, or you're working with a therapist. Even if you're in a good place, you're still working with a therapist, so that you can understand who you are, so you can help you. You can be kind and compassionate to yourself, critical when you need to be in a positive way, and then you can help others. And the second thing is, the way I kind of look at it is, I think there are the human beings who can enact great global help and change. And I think I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm not that person. But what I try to do, and what I think makes me happy, and what I'm able to do in terms of helping others, is I think through my content, through the videos that I make, if I can improve someone's day by just 1%, not 100%, not 50%, I'm not solving their problems or fixing their life, but if I can just improve it a little bit, 1%, 2%, just make them think something differently, make them reframe something, that's good for me, that works. And then that 1% to multiple people, that's improving their life, not on a huge scale, and it's not fixing all of the problems like I just said, but it is improving their life just incrementally, just in a small way. And I think the small things over time can be really powerful. I don't think you have to drop in, sort of force the fixture, force the happiness on somebody. But if you're just helping a little bit to, you know, whatever your means are, whatever you can do, realistically can do, and then somebody else is doing the same and they're also helping themselves, then I think that's a win. I think that's a goal. It doesn't always have to be a sort of a grand thing. It can be a small thing which really does help. And I'm kind of all right with that. I've kind of come to understand that about myself and what I actually can do to help people, you know. And you see it sometimes. I don't know if you have the same thing with what would you call your not clients, patients? I wonder, like, because sometimes I receive a message from someone. Like, I had a video I released about a friend of mine called Dan who passed away, and he passed away really suddenly, and he was in his early 30s, and I wasn't really dealing with it very well. So eventually I did what I know how to do, which is put it into a video format and make a short film about it. I got a message out of the blue by a guy from the States, don't know him, never heard from him before, never spoke to him, complete stranger, who said that his friend had died too, and that he watched this video and it really helped him. I made that video to help me, but that video that I made to help me helped somebody else. And you get these messages from people who you don't know, doing what you're doing, or in some cases you do know them. If they're like a patient or a client or a friend or a colleague or something. And I think sometimes the point I'm trying to get to is that sometimes we don't necessarily know the impact that we can have on other people in doing what we do. And that can be making a video, or it could be sitting in a session with someone, or it could just be having coffee or a chat with somebody, or even just coexisting with them, just being with them, and maybe not even talking about their problem, but just, you know, there's so many ways, both grand and small, that we can help people. And I think if you're open to all of those ways, by probably just being yourself, you realize that you have a lot to give.
We give best when we're not preoccupied with our own pain and suffering. Okay, when we can get sort of beyond our own inner struggles, we then find a space. I'll add to what I think you're saying, and I think for me this is one of my most, I'll call it most profound discoveries. Okay, is that when we're born, we need adults, parents, and other adults in our life to meet our needs. We're not ready. We can't go on our own, and that period of time from birth to autonomy, childhood, adolescence, and then ultimately adulthood is actually a fairly long period of time. We could say 20 years, more or less, right? And so the fact that we need means that there is that which we can do for each other. You know, we could say it's our parents' responsibility to meet our needs. But how many of us have had parents who've known that very clearly and have been able to do that 100%? None of us, okay? So we're mostly living life with our needs partially unmet, okay? And so what we can do for each other is understand what those needs are and how it is that we can meet each other's needs, okay? I put safety as number one. The difference between being able to be together and have real conversations and real connection and real closeness is very much related to if we can feel safe with each other. Safe enough. We're never 100% safe, okay? But we can be safe enough to take the risk to be vulnerable and open and kind and caring, believing it's not gonna smack us in the face, you know? Being safe is a very important platform for how it is we go about life. And the opposite, not being safe, means we're guarded, we're vigilant, we're neglecting our inner life because we're focused on the world around us. We have trouble trusting, okay? Not being safe is a big limitation to how it is we go about the life we have. So for me, this is always one of those primary questions. How can I Your example was a very good one because you, by being open and vulnerable and real, were safe enough for another person to be able to relate, to hear within themselves what it is that was represented in what you had said. So safety is number one. Okay, I won't go through all 7 of them again. We did that in episode 2 or something. But for me, I really would encourage people to think about what those things are. Okay, I will name them just because we're on the topic. So number 1 is safety. Number 2 is guidance. And there's a whole story about the structure we need and the freedom we need and the ways in which step by step through childhood we are guided safely to become learning, growing, changing people. Okay. The third is self-acceptance. We've already talked about that. And we gain self-acceptance best when we've been accepted by those around us who matter the most. Okay? And we struggle with it when we've been rejected or criticized or deemed unacceptable or disapproved of. The fourth one is nurturance. Now, nurturance is, in some ways, it's a subset of both guidance and acceptance. It's the encouragement and the support that allows us to feel loved and cared for no matter what. No matter what. Okay, we're nurtured to be ourself. Okay. The fifth one is what I call to be seen. Okay, and it's to be seen to our essence. Not our behavior, not our image, not our performance, but the being, the namaste, I see the divine in you, is where our essence is. And when we see each other that way, we're not focused on all the things people, all the mistakes people make, all the ways they're caught up in their fears and their angers and their guilts. And we see beyond that to something much more essential to who we are collectively. The next one is autonomy, and that's the goal from birth to adulthood, is to help a person claim the right and the responsibility and the freedom to be ourself, to own the decisions we make, to live the life that's ours to make. Not in isolation or exclusion to the world, but in concert with the world, okay? But it's ownership of this particular human experience, okay? And the last one is play, because play is where we discover. Play is when we're not being imposed upon. You should learn this and you should learn it in this time, in this place, and pass this test. Play is when we're engaged, just like the conversation we had on Sunday with Vu, where he provides a space for children to play in ways that are unrestrained because he's created a safe environment and encouraged them to be themselves, okay? Play is that part of how we come to know ourselves. So for me, this is very important because particularly as a therapist, but also as a friend, yeah, we can be safe or not. We can nurture or not. We can accept or not. And the more we're able to do all of those things, the more we're able to provide, as you say, that kind of context for someone else's life, where they're gonna be able, like a garden, to take advantage of the nutrients in the earth, the right amounts of sun and shade, and all those things that are part of how we become our whole true self. So
You would say these things are needs?
I would say those 7 things are needs, okay? Not needs for survival. That's air and water and, They're needs for this notion of the self-acceptance, which is the point at which we're allowed to thrive. We're allowed to live into our potential. The part that, is metaphorically the oak tree that comes to blossom, the fullness of what it means to be oneself.
How do you distinguish between wants and needs? I find this hard, and I'm not very good at it.
for me, and this is really kind of not, I don't think I've ever been asked that question or thought of it in those terms, but just from the top of my head, I would say that needs are the foundation, okay, that we are limited without, okay. Wants are more related to the desires, the part of us that's trying to figure out who we are and what we want for our life. And so they're not mutually exclusive. They overlap. In fact, I often are reminded of the line from the Rolling Stones song, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need." Okay, and that's beautiful. And I wonder how they had that wisdom when they were, 24 years old. But there is a relationship between wants and needs, and I think needs are that foundation, and wants are the aspirations, maybe, or more connected to what we.
I want to add something to that, because I have this every time I go out and, let's say, shop or and it's all about women, like shopping. I always ask myself, like, do I need this or do I want this? Do I need this because I don't have it and it's necessary, or do I want it to make me feel good? Do I want it to make me feel more self-worthy? Do I need this for me to feel self-worthy? So it's a very two concept that always plays in my mind, because some of my friends also told me that I don't know if this is a want or a need. And I'm not saying that I have a strong understanding about the two things, but I just kind of like ask myself all the time. Let's just say right now exploration is not a need for me, because I feel like, okay, I've explored much. I have a friend who also have this strong, like inner pull of like traveling. And I always say, and the person asks me like, I don't know if I need to do this or I want to do this. And all I can see and see in the person is that I feel like you need to do this to feel complete within yourself. Maybe you need to do this to develop more self-awareness of yourself. You need to expand more as a person. You don't want, perhaps, because of the things that limits you, that your mind is telling you not to do it, because maybe you have a lot of things. You feel safe where you are right now, and you feel like ungrounded if you will go. But you need to do this for yourself, not because of other people. So that's how I kind of like see the difference between wants and needs. Is this something true to me, that I need to do this for myself, or I'm doing this to get validation from other people? Do I want this because this is what I truly want and it makes me feel good, and I feel like it will add to the belief and the confidence and like things that makes you authentic as who you are, because you don't need to ask for validation of others. You're doing this for yourself. So that's how I see it. Like it always boils down for me when it comes to like buying stuff, because let's just say consumerism per se. Especially for women, like it's plastered in our faces. Like you will look more beautiful if you have this. You feel more good if you wear this. But in the beginning, it's not actually how these things. It could add extra feeling for a woman to feel beautiful, but if you achieve to a point of okayness in yourself, that I am beautiful who I am, this is my essence, whatever I bring to the table, this is me, and that's beautiful. These things are just extra, and these things are just something that gives more confidence to me. But if I don't have it, it's okay, because I don't need it. So that I don't, yeah.
Well, I have another thought on this as well, based on what you're saying. So I travel because I feel like it's a need for me. I was in Manchester in the UK for quite a long time, for 15 years, in the same apartment. I felt like I was treading water, and if I'd have just stayed there, eventually I would get tired and I'd just drown. A bit dramatic, but you get what I mean. And so I needed to just go out into the unknown, like we were sort of touching upon before, and travel. So I felt like I needed to do that because it was how I could grow and how I could develop. But I also wanted to buy the flight, I wanted to go to that place and visit this place that I'd never been to. So I'm curious what you all think about, could or can something be both a want and a need?
Okay, there's a thought that comes up. So for me, in my personal journey, I got to this point where I feel like I don't need to travel because I've been living life the past 8 years, moving from one place to another, like moving every 2 years. I need to move from one country to another because of visa, and I'm traveling for work. So that's what I did for the past 8 years, where I literally feel so ungrounded, and I felt like, oh, I need a home base right now. I felt like I was traveling for the past 10 years and I don't know who I am. I got this notion of like, let's say, a conclusion for my personal journey, that someone needs to travel and discover themselves and get to a point where they need to sit down and integrate everything, and then they will feel later on the feeling of like, I don't need to travel, but I want to travel. It's because I wanted to explore. I wanted to see the world because it's huge. And I think it goes like it's a two concept that could actually overlap as what you have said, but this feeling of, as what you've said, like you've been in the same space for 15 years and you feel like you're getting into the point of drowning. And I heard it from you also, Eva, like the other time that we were talking, that you stayed in this managerial position before because of the feeling of you need to do this for other people, but then you feel like you're dying, so that's why you need to change.
I mean, yeah, just to comment on that a bit, what I meant by doing it for other people, I didn't mean it in the what we talked about previously, like saving somebody. I meant that I was doing it because I had this idea of what I'm supposed to be like other people's ideas. Yeah. But yeah, what you've been, wants and needs, I feel like often there is no difference for me personally. I don't know, maybe it's like, in my experience, wanting comes when the needs are satisfied. Mm-hmm. Like, speaking of traveling, I was planning this little trip for a visa run, and I felt that it was coming from a place of curiosity, like inner child. Mm. And it's rare, like for me it's rare, because usually with traveling, for me it's a need. Like, it's a need to escape something. But now, once I feel grounded enough and safe enough and comfortable enough, I noticed in myself this like emerging want. Okay, so I'm curious about that place, because I feel like one needs a lot of resource to be able to want. Like, the capacity to want something requires a lot of inner resource, and if you're in deficit, it just wouldn't work. But this is like my personal experience of that.
Say more about deficit. What do you mean if you're in deficit?
Well, if some needs are unmet, basically, so much so that there is no space for exploring or curiosity, because I associate wanting with exploration, and this is something active. So it's like putting what you want out there. And when there is a deficit, when a lot of needs are unmet, I feel like the person just doesn't have the energy to actively engage with the world. But maybe it's just my type.
I think you're on to something there. It's that sense of deficit, neediness, or not standing on the foundation of self-acceptance, but swimming in the the insecurities of confusion.
Something I wanted to share, it's a bit like if we could go just a little bit back, because we were discussing the topic, which I feel like, I want to share my thoughts and maybe even need to share my thoughts, because I feel like I need to figure something out, works better through talking. Speaking of saving the others, actually, thank you for sharing how, your experience with work and what you find rewarding. Like if it's at least 1% of people that you help, it already means something. Made me reflect on how I perceive my work. I'm currently tutoring English, but I never feel like I can take any credit or want to take any credit for my clients' improvement. Because I feel like it's not my place, it's not my role. I'm just there to offer them a set of tools, and I'm there to offer a conversation and hold like a safe space. And then it's totally up to them to what extent they want to engage. And so I feel good about what I do. I feel good about the work that I do when emotionally the conversation feels good. So when I feel like we're both okay in this conversation, and throughout the lesson a person seems to be feeling good, that's what I guess like the criteria, like my internal criteria for measuring a success, let's say. And I feel like it's related to the fact that the other is always a mirror. So when we want to save somebody, when we see that somebody is not doing okay, and as you said, like attack them with the goodness, like basically the other becomes a mirror of what we need ourselves. And I've been very tempted by trying to save somebody, because it's like this kind of jobs like teaching, and especially I guess therapy, it's very tempting to just step into that role of a savior. And that's what I've been trying to stop doing, I guess to some extent successfully. Because I guess that the question is why would you want to save somebody in the first place, and what is it that makes you think that this person wants to be saved? Yesterday I had a webinar, and I had a very interesting idea, which is a bit new to me, that when a client comes to therapy and they share their story, and the therapist feels like, oh my God, this is so, it's so horrible, how is this person coping? And they start feeling a lot of emotions, like a lot of empathy, compassion, like fear. And then the question is so that's that person's life, that's their subjective experience. So what makes you think that that person is actually suffering? That's how they chose to navigate their life, even in childhood. So yes, there are unmet needs, but the child always looks for a way to meet certain needs. Let me reformulate that. I feel like a child just biologically, organismically, always finds a way to find some state of harmony, some way. It's not always like these mechanisms often become not very effective in adulthood. But there is some way that a child finds to navigate their life, and then it creates their story, and it's their subjective experience. And no matter what it seems to an outsider, it might be okay for a person. And it just, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this, that subjective okayness doesn't have to be aligned with what is generally considered to be okay, maybe even with some ethical norms. And maybe this extra compassion is not good for a person, and instead it would be beneficial for them to give them this empowerment. Like, yeah, this is your story, and this is how you chose to deal with it, and this is your responsibility. And and you're doing good at it, like considering what was the initial conditions which were there. Sorry, I feel like it took me a while to formulate it.
Absolutely. The word that I would plug in there is coping. Okay, because you're absolutely right. When we're living life in ways that maybe aren't meeting our needs, or that are, fraught with challenges, we don't just fold up and die. We don't say, okay, can't do it. No, we cope.
I feel like it sometimes.
Yeah, we do. We feel like, oh, it's too much, but we keep going, we cope. And coping is a good thing. It's an amazing thing. It's an important thing. Okay, and so we always want to honor, as you're saying, what that is. We don't want to say, oh, but you're not doing it the right way. No, we want to be able to allow that to be true and to value how it is that a person has come to do that. But we also can realize that coping is not the same as living from a place where we don't have to cope, okay? Where our needs are met, we're okay, and we're not just getting by, you see? Now, where I see this a lot in therapy is in midlife years. Because as we get older, our coping strategies wear thinner. Okay? It's not meant to be the way we live a whole life. It's meant to get us to the next thing. And of course, there's also healthy and unhealthy versions. There's ways in which addiction becomes part of that coping. There's all these ways in which we're essentially avoiding or neglecting the questions that have to do with why it is we're coping. What it is that we didn't get, maybe, or what we did get, maybe trauma or abuse or something that's painful we'd rather avoid. So, and that's why it's very important for any of us who are in the helping profession, or even thinking, unprofessional, personal support, is not to try to get ahead of people and know what they need and to sort it out. It's to come alongside and hold the space along with them in ways that allow them to feel seen and heard and understood and safe enough to grapple with what that might be, the difference between how I've learned to cope and what it is that maybe is a deeper version of an authentic self.
I guess just one last thing I wanted to connect it to. In the beginning of our conversation today, you mentioned fairness, what is just and what is unjust. And I feel like having this, I caught myself a few times reflecting on my past and thinking that something wasn't fair. And then, but what does it mean, fair or not fair? And it seems to me that this is a path to self-victimization, like something wasn't fair, something was done to me in an unfair way. And again, I guess I'm asking myself, to what extent is it even helpful? Because I think I have this nasty habit to tell myself stories about myself and how I was miserable in some way. And I'm realizing that it really doesn't help. Like, acknowledging certain unmet needs is important to outline a pathway to, what can I do for myself now? But that at the same time, I feel like it could be really therapeutic to, if a person tells themselves, so this is how I managed to cope, this is how I managed to meet my needs. And do we even need to introduce the concept of fairness? To what extent do you think it's necessary?
Well, there's a danger in facing what that might be, because if we conclude that, you know, I wasn't treated fairly, then it means I'm the victim of someone or something. And while sometimes it's important that we acknowledge the degrees to which we have been victimized, maybe by life itself, and the fact that we don't have a collective order that's aligned with fairness and justice. Yeah, it's important that we don't get caught in the side of victimhood that says, oh, you know, it was unfair, and so therefore I'm a victim of life. I think there's a few virtues or values or principles that are quite important. One is justice or fairness. Another one is truth. There's truth and there's falsehood, you know. And we are better off when we're seeking and discovering the truth. And we're better off when we're seeking and discovering the balance of fairness. Now, the false assumption we shouldn't make is that it should be true and it should be fair. Life isn't fair. It won't be. Okay? But we can still hold that as an ideal. And I think the same thing is true for love. Now, love is a more generalized concept, and it can mean very many different things. But I think we need to have these sort of principles around which we navigate, and they might be the North Star, which is far enough off to be able to say we can't expect life to be that way, but they still have to do with maybe how we feel or what it is that represents the ideals that we can aspire to. And yes, I mean, we could go into a whole thing about victimization and the degrees to which we are, and victimhood, which is when we claim that victimization as a way of living life with a certain kind of less responsibility because of what happened to us. Really, what's required of us to be responsible is to learn what it means to heal, to grow, to take responsibility for our relationship to life. And ironically, sometimes people who've suffered the most are forced into those questions and are more likely to find their way through than people for whom life has been kind of okay and they've gone along with the values that have been imposed by consumer culture or by those who've manipulated our collective consciousness. And we don't realize, oh, we're just kind of going with the flow of what's, you know, been a default system, you know. So
this conversation gotten so intense and so interesting. We only have 10 minutes left just to wrap it up. I would love to hear, you know, one last question for each of us, or a thought that you wanted to provide, whatever comes up. But for me, I would like to begin because the what you have mentioned about deficit, you've mentioned about love, this coping mechanism, all this stuff has been running in my head for so long, because me personally, I don't know if this is a suffering, but I had this savior complex. And I have seen it towards most of the people. And I'm trying to ask myself, am I trying to save someone because I feel good about it? Or am I trying to save someone because I'm waiting for someone to save me? So all of these questions are coming up, you know? So how will you be able to, or which need, or I don't know where this will go, but is there a certain need that you have to meet And thus self-love, validation, all these subjective concepts that you should provide within yourself first to feel the okayness. Which need is it? Like, can you point me to a certain point where I can feel like, oh, so this is something that I have to work on for myself, so that I will undo that savior complex, and I'm able to help someone based on what I am abundant from. Does that?
Well, again, we don't have much time, but I would say these are really, really good questions to be asking yourself. And there is this savior complex, martyr complex, and they're both based on the idea that we somehow gain value when we've done something for someone else, either suffered or saved, okay? And ultimately is projecting what we need to do for ourselves onto others, okay? So saving ourselves or figuring out how much suffering there is really figuring out how can I be empowered enough to take or leave something. Okay, I can take it or I can leave it because I don't have to do it. I don't have the need to do it. I can do it out of my choice because I'm already accepting the human being that I am. So empowerment is when we're not compensating for an unmet need or a desire. You see, if I'm insecure and I think by helping Aiden I'm going to feel good, it's probably true, but is it actually resolving my insecurity? No, it's not. It's a compensation for something that's a deeper unmet need. And I think we have to, look more inward to say, well, how much am I either saving people or martyring myself, suffering, on behalf of others, to go, well, something's off balance there, and I end up resenting because I end up giving more than I'm getting, or, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, because before, this is based on the relationship area of life. Let's just say, am I saving this person? And then, is this love? And then later on, when the relationship ends, it will give me the feeling of resentment. And I'm trying to ask myself, like, how can one really give love out from a space of abundance because you have like gave that to yourself enough or more than enough? How will you know that it's out from abundance? How will you know that it came from a clean and genuine space? Is there?
Well, I think that's probably each one of us has to figure out. If we resent it later, then maybe that's. But I think empowerment is I can take it or leave it. I can do it or not do it. Okay, I'm not living from the place where I'm obligated, or I would say the only time when that's not true is when we're responsible for a child. Okay, then it's not true that we don't have that as a responsibility. Okay, and it's also very important that we've accepted that responsibility and that we are full-heartedly, having made that choice, living what that means, because a child needs us as a parent to do for us what we can't do. So I'm aware of the time, and I would love to hear from both of these people.
I guess just like a final thought, that throughout this series of these conversations we've been talking a lot about unmet needs of childhood, and how it is up to us to now meet those needs as we are adults through, by ourselves and with the help of other people who are there to offer. But I feel like today, I feel like when you are asking about differentiating between needs and wants and what it takes to meet the needs so that you can move on to, let's say, wants and other things, there is this implicit assumption that it is possible to meet all your needs in adulthood. And I don't think it is. And there is always some level of discomfort, and there is always something which is unmet, and that's what creates these dynamics in life. And I guess that what I'm saying is that there shouldn't be this ideal point that like I need to meet all of my needs first and then I can go go about my life and do stuff. Like it's just never going to happen. So yeah, I guess it's about finding this point where it's just enough so that I can try to explore, try to find the state of curiosity within me.
I just want to add just short one. It seems like this idea or concept of, oh, you need to be whole yourself to attract a whole partnership so that you can co-create together and not extract love or whatever subjective internal things that you need to give to yourself. You know, we won't extract it from others. So it seems like with what you've said, and it actually clicked in my head that you don't need to be whole, like entirely whole, to open yourself for experiences and people, but just be aware and okay with what you have and being enough. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. Because it becomes a goal to an extent. Yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. I think if you can be okay with being in a place of learning, with not knowing all the answers, with not being able to 100% help everyone else and yourself. A lot of people, they don't necessarily feel comfortable in that place. They want to have the answers, they want to be the best. But are you ever really going to have all the answers or be the best? Like, ever? Probably not. And then also on top of that, when you can kind of lean more towards that understanding, then being kind and showing compassion to yourself in those moments when you don't know these things, whether to help yourself or to help others. I think if you can like not master but work towards those two things, not necessarily knowing and having the answers and also being kind and understanding of yourself, not knowing those things, it's a bit like a 1-2 punch kind of thing, like a 1-2 punch of peace within yourself, and then you'll go from there and just do what you can do and figure it out, and that's okay. And that makes sense.
It's okay.
That's a good way to conclude, because it's a process that's continuously dynamic. Okay, it isn't about 100%. It's about the degree to which and how it is at a particular time we might be operating from one or more unmet needs. And it's that self-awareness that allows us to organically unfold as we discover. And so there's not an arrival point. There's not, I got to do this first and then I can do the rest. It's living in that subtext of self-awareness that allows us to keep accepting, keep allowing for what it is that's happening. And when we get a little bit of insight as to, oh, maybe I'm overcompensating, or I'm coping, or I'm, that comes out of some part of me that I haven't explored enough or deeply enough. And believe me, that happens when you're 72, as well as when you're, as young as all you guys are. So it's not as if there's an arrival there, but there is, I say, know that you know what you know, and know that you don't know what you don't know, And both of those things are very important in terms of allowing ourselves to accept who we are. So thank you. Thank you, Aidan, for not only coming, but for showing up in a very real way and sharing your thoughts and ideas. And I think it adds to what we have here, yourself. And of course, thank you to both of you, because you're steadily following and tracking these thoughts and being curious and interested and teasing out some of the parts that are less clear, and in a way that feels connecting. Okay, and it feels like we're together sorting this out. And yeah, particularly today, I feel like, okay, I'm sort of representing this old man version, you know, like maybe I'm supposed to know more than everybody, but I think there's room for what we all bring, and so thank you for that.
And this what makes this space very magical and powerful. It's because we bring who we are on the table. And I just want to make this take this time, Aiden, for saying thank you for being open and for saying yes and for being here. And Eva for always consistently saying yes to my request.
Even at 8:30 in the morning.
Yes, early in the morning. I still hear her like, oh, she's working late right now. And I feel all these kind of things, but I'm always grateful how the dialogue ends and it gives satisfaction. So thank you, everyone.